Welcome to the Black Belt Business Podcast. My name is Matthew Brenner, and today I'm with John Bussard. He's a martial arts school owner, runs a franchise of 9 martial arts schools. Oh, is it a franchise technically?
No, it's not a
Not,
franchise.
not a
I
franchise.
own everything. So
Yes, not a franchise, but he owns 9 martial arts schools. Oh, sorry, you own 8, and then one of them is licensed?
correct, correct.
Correct. Yeah, okay, cool. So, John, give us a little bit about your martial arts business background.
Okay. I opened my first school in 1994. I started training in 1979. Um, my original instructor was a sort of a Mr. Miyagi type guy. His name was Kiwon Kim. Um, Very traditional Korean instructor. Wasn't very good at business, but it produced a lot of outstanding martial artists and martial arts champions um, back in the old days of the 60s, 70s, 80s. But I started training with him in 1979. I opened Kicks Karate in 1994 after he passed away. We are celebrating our 30th anniversary this year. Currently, we have 8 locations. We're in Maryland, in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. I own 8 locations personally, and we have one location that is licensed to a young man who is now in his mid 30s, and I think he started training with me when he was 9 or 10 years old. So he's been with us for a long time.
Very cool. And if you're a martial arts school owner and you're maybe looking to either expand to more locations or maybe to license or you just want to grow, this is going to be the episode for you because we're going to talk about lease agreements. We're going to talk about how to figure out when to expand, how to figure out when to close. We're not just going to talk about Mr. Bussard's successes, which are great and all, but like things lessons that he's learned along the way. I know through COVID, you've been very public on Facebook about closing some locations, how difficult that was, or renegotiating leases and stuff like that. So I saw what you post, but I want to hear from you too as well, personally, about what that experience was like. So one of the things you mentioned to me is that your model is different from when before COVID to when it is now. So what changed? You were at 14 locations, now you're at 9. What happened?
Well, I think a lot changed during COVID. Um, like I said, I started in 1994, and there were sort of blips in the radar along the way. We had 9/11, we had DC sniper that was shooting people around DC, and slowed us down a little bit. We had the recession, which slowed us down a little bit in 2007, 2008. But we never really had anything that had an impact on our business like COVID did. So from 1994 until COVID hit, we were, pretty consistently growing and steadily growing. So, every couple of years we would open another location. We would either sometimes we would add to an existing location, but things continually grew. When COVID hit, one of the things that you hear about in business in general is that the person who owns the business, when they initially start out, you hear about 50% of businesses who open, they close within the first year. Those sort of statistics. And what we found is that through that long period of growth, I never experienced those business troubles, so to speak. I was very fortunate in that. But when COVID hit, literally, within a week, the governor closed us down. Or actually, I guess it was the Attorney General of Maryland who sent us a letter and said, we're not allowed to be open. All the health clubs in Maryland were shut down. I know that that's a pattern across the country, but for us, we lost about half of our student body within, I'd say, the first month or two. So very shortly thereafter, we had 14 landlords contacting us, demanding to be paid their rent. Some of them were understanding, some of them weren't. We had to do some things to restructure our company. We terminated a lot of employees, laid them off. eventually started doing, classes via video. Um, and those were okay, but it wasn't bringing in the numbers that we had pre-COVID. So we had a lot of tough decisions to make. So what we decided to look at was, um, you know, how were we paying people? Um, what were the sizes of our school? Could we do things differently moving forward? And some of the things we strategically figured out, and some of the things that changed actually happened by accident. Um, for example, we always had a private introductory lesson that we used when we were teaching classes. Well, when COVID happened, once we were able to open, we had to put dots on the mat a certain number of feet apart, and had to do things a little differently in terms of the number of people that could come to class, and they had to reserve a spot in the class ahead of time, and so on. So we couldn't do the same introductory process that we were doing before. So we changed it, and we said, okay, we're just going to have people come in and try the class. They'll come in, they'll take the class just like everybody else. It was a beginner class. And it worked really well. Our enrollments weren't taking place in an office anymore. They were taking place via text chat and different things, and it was working really well. So some of the things kind of surprised us. But I guess what happened during COVID was I realized for the first time that I was kind of in it. I don't want to say I was in it alone. I had my wife and, and some key people that were in it with me. But, the landlords weren't going after my employees. They were coming after me. I was the guy who signed the lease. I was the guy who, had committed to paying the rent and so on. So when I realized that, it sort of changed my mentality a little bit. Because like I said, that was the first time in 25 years that we had ever had an issue where landlords were coming after us and taking us to court and so on. So we ended up hiring a bankruptcy attorney because I really thought we were going to file for bankruptcy. We hired what is known as a lease liquidator, a guy who, works with companies who have filed bankruptcy to work with their landlords to downsize, to try to come out of bankruptcy at some point in the future if they can. But having those guys contact your landlord is a lot different than when I contact my landlord. It's just that they take the call a little more serious. And also those two, the bankruptcy attorney and the lease liquidator, some of our landlords are national companies, and they had contacts higher up the food chain, so to speak, that they could speak to about it. So it really, going through that entire process made us look at, how large do we want our schools to be? So we looked at square footage when we closed some schools that were profitable, but let me take a step back. When you start with one or two or three locations, it's very easy, if you're in the Washington, D.C. area or the Philadelphia area or, around a large city, it's easy to look at the map and go, okay, this is a great area right here. This is a great area right here. This is where I want to open my locations. But as you get more and more locations, all of a sudden, there's not as many great demographic areas that you can choose from. So what we did is we looked at it and said, okay, this school's okay, but it's not great. It's not doing that well. It's profitable. All of our schools were profitable, but they weren't, some of them weren't generating as much profit as others. So we worked with the lease liquidator and the attorney to try to close some locations. And we really tried to keep the locations that we thought were really great spots, good instructors, great demographics, and so on. And we consolidated into, as it turned out, what ended up being a better company for us. We got rid of some of the, I don't want to call them less than locations, but that's in essence what they were. So it was just a great process for us to go through and to really learn from. And I think that's the thing that I got out of it the most.
How did you know if the school wasn't doing well because of the demographics or because of the operator? Like, how do you figure that out?
I think you have to, part of it is we knew going into it, right? We open a location within an area. We knew it was um, not challenging, but we would find that this particular location, they have more people that kind of question price, that they're concerned about. And when I say question price, not question it in a sense of they're trying to just get a deal. I mean question it because they legitimately have financial concerns about being able to afford the tuition. So different areas are better in terms of the disposable income and so on, the number of uh, households that are in that community, within a 3 mile radius of the shopping center that we're in. Um, I guess just through time monitoring the growth of the school, the revenues at that particular school. And the other thing that happened is we had two of the locations that we closed were newer locations that weren't necessarily bad locations, but they were just ramping up. They weren't really at a point where we felt that they had enough of a student body and enough of a following that we were going to make it through. And the other, when we did this, the thing was, um, it's one thing to downsize, but literally in the back of my head, I'm thinking, we may end up filing Chapter 11, so we're going to reorganize. We're going to get rid of those leases. And my bankruptcy attorney said something to me one day. He's like, John, you're probably going to have to file Chapter 22. And I said, what's a Chapter 22? And he said, well, you're going to file Chapter 11. Maybe you're going to downsize to about 8 locations, and then that's not going to work. So we're going to immediately go back into Chapter 11 again. So you do Chapter 11, Chapter 11, you got Chapter 22. So, we may come out of it with 3 or 4 locations when all is said and done. Now, fortunately, we never even had to file because we were able to negotiate with those landlords. We spent some money to buy out of some of those leases. But again, a big part of it was I made the initial contact with the people, told them what our situation was, that we had lost half of our student body and so on. And then the attorney got involved and the lease liquidator got involved. So at that point, the landlord had to make a choice. Would we rather have some money, or if they file Chapter 11, we're not getting anything. So we were able to work some deals where, we gave a landlord $50,000 to walk away. And, we still had 4 years left on our lease, and $200,000 of rent. So we were able to make some deals that really worked out well for us, and also made some deals where, we had 3,000 square feet, and we decided that, we would be better off downsizing. So we would give back half the space if it was, suitable for that location, and come out of it with a 1,500 square foot school. So we did some things differently. The model that we were using changed a little bit, but overall, I think it was, kind of a blessing in disguise almost, in terms of it made our business a little bit easier to run. And, things have been going smoothly. We were able to build back, and fortunately haven't had a lot of issues since then.
So do you think the lease liquidator was like he was the reason you were able to get out of some of these leases because he was like that's what his career is, or do you think you could have done it on your own?
I couldn't have done it on my own. No way. I,
You
I
did.
mean, I could have filed Chapter 11, but the thing is, when you're in a situation like that, typically you or I, when we call, unless you're in direct, if you have a landlord that just owns a building and you're renting from that landlord and you have direct contact with them, that's one thing. But we're in Class A shopping centers, and a lot of them are either regionally owned or nationally owned. Some of them are traded on the stock exchanges. So we have a contact with a representative from the company that has very limited power. So everything had to, then go up the chain. And, usually the lease liquidator had a contact because, he had dealt with companies like Modell's, the Hair Cuttery, those kind of companies that had filed Chapter 11 and come out of it on the other side. So he knew some of these people. We would have a conversation on the phone, and he would say, "Oh yeah, I know somebody from that company. I'll reach out to them." And he would just go 4 or 5 levels above the people that I was talking to, and he was able to get some deals done for us. And some of them were good deals, some of them were okay, and some of them were not very good. But he definitely helped us along the way.
So how much, besides like how much it costs maybe to buy yourself out of a lease, how much does it cost just in legal fees? How much you have to pay some lease liquidator to do all this work?
I don't know the exact number. I know the bankruptcy attorney's rate was $600 an hour. So he did quite a bit of work for us. I would imagine it was, you know, we'd have to get my bookkeeper on the phone to, figure that out. But I think at that time, it was really a question of survival, and making the best decisions. And I have no doubt that if I hadn't been able to use that bankruptcy attorney and the lease liquidator, I think we probably would have went out of business.
Wow. Okay. So he's really helpful. That's good.
Yeah.
So now you said you changed your model a little bit. So what was your model before and what is it now?
Well, before we had, when I say changed our model, I think we changed our perspective a little bit on how we're going to do things. Um, how we're how we're going to treat our staff. We're going to treat our staff fairly, but one of the things that I was always trying to do was to pay my instructors really, really well. So we had instructors at different points in time that were making $120,000 a year, $150,000 a year, and these were not owners. These were just guys that work for me. And I realized that we were overpaying people. That was one of the things that I discovered, is that we wanted to be fair with people. And I'll give you an example. One of the guys who I don't want to say we let him go. He actually resigned, but we had to decrease his pay significantly. So he decided he wanted to go out and he wanted to find a job. Well, he started looking around, and we were paying him very, very well. And what he told me, he came back and told me, he said, there's a lot of jobs out here for managers that you can get. And again, this is 3-4 years ago, so I don't know if anything's changed since then. But he said a lot of managerial jobs that you can get paying $75,000 a year. But he said if you want to make over 100, you got to go back into sales. So he went back and he got a job trying to sell air conditioners. And because he wanted that really high income, and we just weren't in a position where we could pay them that way again. So we kind of decreased that. We tried to decrease our rents as much as possible. We downsized on the amount of space that we were going to take. We maximized the use of the space. So for example, we had a school that was a little over 2,900 square feet. It was a 2-room school, so we had 2 classes going on at once. We were able to give back slightly over half the space. We ended up with a 1,400 square foot school, so it's not very big, but it's in a mall area. So fortunately, in this mall area, the landlord had put tables and chairs and just made it a really nice area. And there's a Safeway and a little coffee shop in the mall. So a lot of the parents, they come in, they bring their laptops, they sit at the tables outside. They're not actually even coming into the school. So basically, the school is a mat. It has 1 bathroom. There are also 2 bathrooms out in the mall if people need to use them. So we downsized to 1,400 square feet. We only have 1 full-time staff member there, plus a couple of part-time staff. So we decreased the expenses tremendously. And of course, the revenue had dropped because of COVID, but now We didn't need as much staff. We didn't need as much space. And, that school does about 33,000 a month in revenue, which compared to what we were doing before, that school was doing, 50,000 a month in revenue. But because we cut things down so much, we're still as profitable as we were before. And now we have less to worry about, less headaches, not as many issues, with the school because it's just one room. It's very easy to manage. One mat. So there's some things like that we changed and just modified. And if I were looking to open additional locations, I think I would stick to that smaller school model, because if you run it the right way, they can be just as profitable as a larger school.
So is that hard for students or the instructors to stomach? Like, hey, we had 3,000 square feet. Now we have 1,400, right? Or, a split in half. Because I know some of our instructors, they'll come from a school maybe that's in a suburb area. I had to deal with this recently, where they might be 3,000 square feet. The real estate's cheaper there, right? And they'll move to a city location, and now it's 1,800 or 1,700. And it's like, you really got to be mindful of where you store stuff, how many things you purchase. You can't just have a cache of, 75 targets and some back closet or some basement, right? And for them, it's hard. It's really hard. And they have to adjust. And like, they're constantly, we don't have enough space. I'm like, you're in a city and people are walking by and just walk it in and looking at class. Like, you're going to pay for it in marketing. You're going to pay for it in your real estate. It's a much better location. Like, but it's just different. You have to adjust. You have to keep some stuff in your trunk or in your car, like, or don't order as much at one time, right? So I guess, like, how do you get your instructors and staff to get on board with that sort of thing?
Well, I think part of it was they all came through the pandemic with us. So when we did that, and here's the other thing that was unique. As I said, before the pandemic, we were growing. Well, because of the pandemic, what it allowed us to do was it kind of gave us a reason, right? A reason to downsize, to kind of trim the fat, so to speak, get rid of some of the locations that were a little underperforming or weren't performing as well as we wanted to. But at the same time, we had a reason. We had an excuse. We could say, listen, this is because of COVID. If COVID didn't happen, we wouldn't be doing this. But because of that, and because we could say that, the parents, the students, the staff, everybody was more understanding because they wanted us to survive, right? So when we did the downsizing, I think if we did it today and we said, hey, we're taking a school that's 3,000 square feet and cutting it in half, and it's only going to be 1,500 square feet, yeah, I think we would get gripes from students, from parents, from staff members, everybody. But at that time, we were able to do it simply because of what was going on around the country, around the world.
Yeah, that's great. That when you're all going through something, it's easy to, I guess, come together for a common goal, a common mission.
Yeah.
So let's talk about kind of what it was at the peak. So across 14 schools, what was your average revenue that you wanted for a school to get to when they're mature?
Well, they were all different. And the reason I say that is, when you look at a martial arts school, it really depends on the model that you have and the key factors. There's only two things that you can control, right? The two main things, which are your rent that you're paying and your staff costs. Those are the two things that you have control over. Everything else, the market, you can't control what your electricity costs or your phone bill or whatever. Obviously you can control how much you spend on advertising, marketing, et cetera. But, certain costs are built in. And what we would do is we had two models. We had a 1-room model and a 2-room model. So a 1-room model is, like I said, it's anywhere from the smallest one was like 1,400 that we have now up to 2,200 square feet, where it's just one mat, which I love that model because whoever the instructor is, they know every single thing that's going on at the school, right? If somebody walks in for class, they're there, they see them. So they know who's coming, who's going, what's going on the floor, um, all the situations with the students, with the parents, with the little brothers and sisters. They know everything about the place. When you get to a two-room model, that has advantages and has disadvantages. The advantage is if I have a school that has two mats, um, now I can have two different classes going on at the same time. So at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I could have, 8 to 12-year-old orange, green, and blue belts in one room, and I could have 3 and 4-year-old tiny tiger kids in another room, or whatever it is. But I can have simultaneous classes going on. So the advantage is in terms of scheduling, there's more scheduling options for the parents. There's a lot of different benefits that go with that. But the negative is now I need two high quality instructors at that same facility, right? And the other thing that happens is sometimes the instructors rotate. So, you have instructor A who's in room number one, instructor B who's in room number two, but they need days off. They switch around sometimes. So now it's harder to keep track of which students are attending, right? You go into a room where you weren't there for the last 2 weeks. You walk in, you teach that class, but you don't know which of these kids has been attending consistently, which of them has not been attending consistently, which needs a little more help, and so on. So you're not seeing some of those things that are happening. So the two-room model is a little more complicated. So when we look at the revenue, obviously a two-room school is going to generate more revenue because you've got the opportunity to teach twice as many students there. So based on that, we would look at it. Okay, for the one-room school, depending on the size, depending on the staff, we wanted to have that school generate between 30 and 50,000 on the high end, and that's on the very high end for a one-room school. For the two-room schools, it was much different. We wanted them on the low end to be at about 40, 45,000, up to 75, 80,000 on the high end. So it really depended on how big the school was, how many staff we had there, the location itself. All of those things, played into it. But like I said, I really enjoy the one room model much more. In my early days, I would have given you the opposite answer. I would have said I love the 2 room model. But now that I've had a chance to do both for a long period of time, I just think the 1 room model gives us a lot more advantage in terms of, not necessarily in terms of profitability, but there's less risk involved in it. It's easier to manage, and in many cases just as profitable.
So now when you look for a new location, you're looking for a one school or one room location in a class A shopping center still?
Yes,
And
definitely. I prefer, because for me that's like part of our marketing plan. It's we want to be in a grocery anchored shopping center, in a retail section. That means we're going to pay more rent. But to me, that's just part of the marketing cost, and it gives us the exposure that we need to grow that location. It gives us the safety of going into a retail shopping center versus going into a warehouse section or an industrial area. So that's been our model for a long time.
So how much do you typically pay a square foot in Class A? By the way, for people who are not listening, Class A shopping centers, this could be like higher end shopping centers, right? Where there's, so I'm not sure exactly who qualifies as Class A. Is it the investors of the shopping center, the owners? How's something Class A versus Class B? There's like types of stores.
I think you have to look at, just the stores that are there, the upkeep of the shopping center, and it's tough because there are a lot of those higher end shopping centers that don't want a martial arts school, that it just doesn't fit with, um, the group of tenants that they want. They want a lot of restaurants and, um, I would just say different retailers than a crowded store. Somebody told me a joke one time. They said,
Yeah, right. A class B, I guess. Yeah.
yeah. So anyway, this was me sitting in front of a landlord, trying to rent space, and he said, let me ask you a question. And I said, sure. And he said, how do you know when a shopping center is getting ready to go under? And I said, I don't know. How do you know? And he said, when they put a karate school in it.
Oh my
That was like
God.
25 years ago, but I was shocked. I was like, why does this guy have such a negative image of martial arts schools? But he did. And I ended up obviously not establishing a relationship with him. And we went our separate ways. But, but the other side of it is, I've called people, like I've called real estate brokers who are, the listing agents for shopping centers. And I can't even tell you how many times this has happened, where I'll call up and I'll introduce myself and I'll say, hi, this is John Bussard. I'm the CEO and founder of Kicks Karate. We've got 10 locations in Montgomery and Frederick counties locally, and we are expanding, and I would love to be in your shopping center. And the person goes, oh, Kicks Karate. My daughter went to one of your schools, and next thing you know, it's like, when I hear that, I'm like, okay, we're in, So
Right,
I've had
right.
it go both ways. I've had it where it's helped us, and I've had it where just they didn't want anything to do with it. So it's a, crapshoot, I guess.
Well, it's always easier when you say like, "Oh, we already have 10 locations." And they're like, okay, cool. Like they have their. It's not some single owner who's coming in and try to start a business for the first time. This is someone who's
Right.
a seasoned operator. So when you go into a new location, let's say a shopping center, so Class A, and for people who are wondering, like I'm sure you could look up online like what's Class B or Class C, but like I'd assume Class B might be like if there's like maybe like a dollar store or like a MoneyGram, just like stores that might cater to people that are more middle lower income, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
if there's a gun shop, a tattoo parlor,
a smoke shop,
yeah,
Taco Bell,
exactly. Any
maybe.
of those kind of things. That's not typically they typically don't put those in the Class A shopping centers. But as those things become more and more um, mainstream, you never know. It's retail changes all the time, so it's interesting.
Yeah, I know when I was looking for, we typically in our schools, some of them are in shopping centers, some are just like buildings that um, my brother or the owner of the individual location may own, and that are more suburban or a single building. But I remember I was looking for a shopping center in this area, and they were telling me how they're trying to attract high end stores. And I was talking to the other uh, uh, business owners in the area. Like I went to the other businesses and said, hey, where's the owner? I'm thinking about opening the location, and they're like, yeah, the landlord keeps saying they want to attract better businesses, but they're opening a Popeyes next door, and they were so mad that they're opening a Popeyes. It's like it didn't attract what the businesses that they wanted in that shopping,
Right.
in that shopping mall. Um, so people will say one thing, but then you never know what they're actually doing. Someone who's coming in and willing to pay rent, and because if you're a commercial landlord, sometimes you sit on an empty lot for 1, 2, 3, 5 years, and those expenses add up. We bought a commercial location during COVID, a building that had 4 units in an 1, 2, 3, yeah, 4 units in an amazing, sorry, 3 units in an amazing area, like super high end income. The martial arts school that we put in there does extremely well. One of our best performing locations. Um, and we, one of the units has been empty for over 2 years.
Wow.
And it's right by a train stop. It's like a very high end mall next door. We thought it was going to be easy to rent. That's why we got it. But we've had like, I would say at least 3 or 4 real estate brokers in there, and can't get it rented. So now we're doing some renovating to it to see if that helps. It was kind of like a office looking space, and now we're transforming it into a vanilla box. So it's just like extremely basic and someone can come in and see their vision better. But now we have to put a bunch of money into it,
Yeah.
right? And people sit in that for a long time, and eventually they'll get they'll get desperate, and you never know who you might let in. Even though originally you might be like, oh, I don't want this type of business, and you're like, oh, it's been empty for 3 years, whatever. One of the units is a smoke shop, and at first when they came to us, we're like, no, we have a martial arts school attached to it. We have it's like a kids play center where parents can drop their kids off and they can like play for a couple hours, and the parents can have coffee. That's who rents the other spot. Like, we can't have a smoke center, like a cigar shop. And landlords hate cigar shops.
Mm-hmm.
They do not want to put cigar shops in their shopping centers generally because it smells and attracts
Right.
certain types of people, right? And the guy, but it was empty for, I don't know, maybe about a year, and we're sweating it, right? The rent on it. And someone comes to us and asks us to rent it. And they say there's not going to be any smoking in the facility whatsoever. People just go in, buy a product, and leave. Like, there's going to be no smoking whatsoever. And we're like, oh, I guess it's fine. And obviously that's written in the lease. And before you know it, the business opens up, and we realize that, oh, this is really a bong shop. And now that's next to our martial arts school. So he got us. Covered on the glass. Now it's like, oh, we see what happened here, right?
Uh-huh.
And now they're in like, 5-year lease, or with it, with a 5-year option, and every once in a while there'll be smoke smells that wafts into the martial arts school, and from who knows where, and it's not the best look, right? So, but we're stuck in it. So you live, you learn as a landlord too. And the guy is a great guy. The guy who owns it is a very nice, sweet guy. It's just like, not the optimal type of business for
Yeah.
next to a martial arts school, right?
But, again, that's where things are changing is, it's like the marijuana business. We had in one of our shopping centers, there was a company called Bloom Pharmaceuticals, and they legally sold marijuana. And you know, people, nobody was smoking, nobody was taking pills or doing any of that. But you'd see all sorts of people in suits and ties and dresses. You'd see doctors, nurses, people of all walks of life walk into there. They'd come out with their little bag and they'd get in their car and they'd drive away. And so it's funny. Like, as martial artists, we sometimes think that we're better than them, in a way, in terms of, like, we want to set a great example for our students and so on. But as society changes and shifts, and that becomes more of a normal thing, it's just a normal thing. It's not any different than any other business that's in there, than a dress shop, or and in some ways better than a dress shop because it brings more people into the shopping center. So
Yeah.
it's just different.
And I think it probably depends on the pot shop too, because
Oh yeah.
most of the time now when you drive by, like, Philadelphia is where we are is legal medical, not
Mm-hmm.
recreational. So most of them are extremely discreet, right? Like, there'll be a sign out front, of course, and it might say, but usually it doesn't say marijuana, or usually it's not some giant weed leaf or something. It'll be
Right.
like, I don't know what I'll say. I'll like have like the brand name on it, and the windows are like not there's like a security film in the window, right? And there's usually a security guard outside, and it's like people go in and leave, and it's like there's no ruckus happening there ever,
No.
right? So it really depends
People
on the
are,
location.
people are using to treat anxiety and depression and uh, arthritis and cancer, all sorts of things. So um, it's like I said, it's more commonplace now. And and the thing is, I used to think like our student body would, um, if they knew about that, would be upset. But I think they just, it's just part of mainstream society now.
It's probably just convenient for some of the moms and dads. They're like, oh, great, I can
They
stop
might
again, stop
be.
my
They
classes.
might be
Look up,
sneaking over there while their kids in class.
yeah, if I'm gonna
You
sit
never
here and
know.
watch an hour class, I might as well be intrigued by it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Chew
so
on a
I want to
gummy
hear,
or something.
I want to hear about the locations that you choose. So, okay, you're going to choose a Class A shopping center. What demographic in the neighborhood are you looking for exactly?
We're looking for um, lots of families. So we're trying to go where there's a lot of housing. We're typically in the suburbs versus the downtown city areas. So we're in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. We're looking for elementary schools. We're looking for lots of kids in the area. And from, in terms of income levels, where I live, in the DC area, incomes are a little higher. So usually we would say a minimum of about $120,000 household income for that area. We're looking, like I said, lots of families and children. Those are the demographics that we're looking for, and within that 3 mile radius around it. The other thing that I actually look for is, and I know some people don't care about this, but I do. I'm looking for sort of like the right environment in terms of um, is it a younger neighborhood? Is it an older neighborhood? I like areas that are sort of up and coming. For example, a few years ago, well, I guess now it's been probably 10, 12 years ago, there was an area that was being built. It wasn't built yet, but it was an area that they were going to build lots and lots of homes, townhomes, condominiums, single family homes, all sort of jammed in there in this community. And the shopping center hadn't even been built yet. So one of the guys who worked for me was training for a marathon. So he was, kind of back, and he was running through this neighborhood. The streets were done, but the housing, the shopping centers and things weren't done. So he was running back, and it said, you know, future home of Clarksburg Village Center, which was the name of the shopping center that was coming. That was the only thing that was there. And then there was a sign for leasing information. And the rest of it was just a giant pile of dirt at that time. So, I like to find places that are either growing or up and coming, um, and look for those. And of course, if a neighborhood's been there for a long time and it's established, if the neighborhood has turned over, where a lot of the people, they've raised their kids, and now they decided, okay, we want to downsize because we're empty nesters or whatever, and then there's new families moving in. Those areas are great too. But that's the type of area we look for, and then we try to find a shopping center that's grocery anchored, and we are looking for space that is, not necessarily the next door neighbor of the grocery store, but we want to be in the sight line, right? So when somebody pulls into the parking lot and they look at the stores that are there, we want to be at least, within visual distance of the shop, of the large anchor if we can. Um, and of course, when you go into those places, your rents are going to be higher. So right now, and through the years, I found that, the rents, they kind of go up and down, depending on the situation. Like you mentioned, during COVID, you guys were able to buy a building. Well, I'm pretty sure you probably got a better deal on the building buying it during COVID than if you would have bought it before or after. So I did something like that with a shopping center, back in the recession, where all of the blockbuster video stores, which had large footprints, were closing. And this one closed before the recession happened, but the space was just sitting there, and it was just malls were like ghost towns. There was nothing going on, but I knew it wasn't going to last forever. So we took a big chunk of that blockbuster space, and we were able to negotiate a great deal at that time because we were in the middle of a recession. So sometimes, when you do it when things are down, it's better. If I was looking for a space today, I'd be a little concerned, because right now, with inflation and everything that has happened, to me, it seems like we're almost at the top of a bubble. And at some point, something has to give because people can't afford to buy houses. Um, I'm watching businesses that are good businesses that have been established and been there for a long time. I'm watching them close. And a lot of times they're closing because the landlords are now trying to make up the money that they lost during the pandemic. So um, they know that they kind of have you over a barrel and they're charging more. So I'm seeing the rents are going up and have been going up for a while. And at some point, it's going to reverse itself. And then there's going to start to be a lot of openings in the shopping centers. And when those openings happen in the shopping centers, that's the best time to actually go and lease space, because then now it's a renter's market instead of a landlord's market. Right now, it's 100% landlord's market. They dictate the terms, and the terms can be a little unfair, right now. So it really depends on the timing of it.
So how much obviously depends on what year, when you buy it, and exactly which neighborhood. But how much do you typically want to spend per square foot? Is there a certain range you try to stay within in your area?
Well, like I said, it's creeping up. This year we have 3 schools within the next 12 months where the leases are expiring. One of them I've already negotiated, and it's fine. So I think we're paying about $35 a square foot at that location, triple net. Another one, we're still working with them. Again, the base price that they've quoted us is $35 a foot. Now we've got an air conditioning issue, an HVAC issue there that we want to replace we have 2 units. We want to replace both of them. And we've been quoted about $30,000 to do that. So we're trying to work out something with the landlord. And again, if it was a renter's market, we might be able to get the landlord to pay for it. But right now, they're willing to work with us and they're willing to come out of pocket and pay for it. But then they're going to want to increase our rent. So if they pay for the HVAC, they're going to increase our rent on a 5-year lease up to $39 a foot. So I just have to decide whether or not I want to come out of pocket myself and pay for it and keep our rent lower, or do I want to, rent's a deductible expense. So I may just want to pay the higher rent and stay there because the school's doing really well. So that's an issue. And then I have another school next June, that lease expires. And I already know that landlord's going to really try to stick it to us because they've tried it in the past.
Okay.
We've been there for about 15 years and we've dealt with this. And in fact, they were one of the hardest landlords to deal with during COVID. They're just they're not tenant friendly. So I'm already looking at the possibility of moving that location because I think they're going to probably come at us with something in the 40s, something $40+ a foot. They haven't done it yet, but I know it's coming. So we're going to have to, again, make a tough decision. Is it worth it to stay there? Because that rent is going to go up, 2-3% every year. And that's the other thing that has happened in a landlord's market. We had recently we had a landlord that wanted 4% escalations in our annual rent, which is just outrageous. Mm-hmm. But they're using the old what's going on in the economy. They're saying, hey, look at inflation. It's it's everywhere. We have to keep our rent up to the same speed. So instead of signing a 5-year lease extension, we did it at 4%, but we only did it for 3 years, and we're hoping that in 3 years things will be different. So every situation's a little unique, and you just have to look at them individually and try to make the best decision.
So when you're looking at a shopping center and you're looking at how many families are there, household income, whether it's newer families that are recycling in, are you looking at like demographics you find on Google, or do you just live there for a long time so you kind of know the areas? Where are you finding this information?
A little of both, and a lot of it, is just sort of driving around the area and making sure that there's lots of families. What are the schools like in the area? How many schools are in the area? And not just public schools, but private schools. Are there lots of daycare centers in the area? Those kind of things. So we're looking at all of that. The shopping centers in the area. If it's a shopping center and the shopping center is empty, that's a problem. If the shopping center is full of other tenants, lots of other tenants, and those tenants seem to be doing well, sometimes we'll talk to those tenants and try to find out how things are going. But we're really looking at the entire area around it, and do we believe that area is going to be able to support our school? And then the other thing is, there's one area that in 30 years, I call it my kryptonite, because it's an area that I've always wanted a school and I've never had one there. But it's kind of a weird situation, because early on there was one other, the demographics are unbelievable. And there was one other karate school in the town, and I wanted to go in and I wanted to open it. The landlord didn't want us as a use, so we ended up not opening in that spot. The next thing you know, there was another shopping center got built and a karate school went in there. So, over the course of the years, I finally found an opportunity to open there. But by the time I found that opportunity, the school had 4 martial arts schools within throwing a rock's distance. And so I said to myself, do I want to go in and be the 5th martial arts school trying to build here when these 4 are already planted in here, and some of them had been there for over 10 years. And even though it was a great demographic location, I just said, you know what? I don't want to be here. I don't want to have to go in against that much competition. At some point it gets oversaturated, and it would have just been, maybe we would have made it, maybe we wouldn't. But I just felt like, even though I love the demographics of the area, I just didn't think that it was the right time to do it. So we passed on it.
Okay, so some of it is going to be by feel, and some of it be by looking at demographics online. And if you're a martial arts school owner and maybe you've never done this before, if you have a really good commercial real estate agent, they'll be able to get demographics for you.
Oh yeah.
And what we'll look for
most
is
of them have them on the, like, if you're looking online, most of the listings put the demographics, or at least some of the demographics, how many people live within a 1 mile, 3 miles, 5 miles, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that stuff's pretty easy to find. I think the harder thing to find depends on which site you look at and which real estate agent you have. Because if you don't know, go to loopnet.com. That's for commercial real estate. So that's like your first thing. Another one is Crexi, CREXI.com. That's going to be things that are not always on LoopNet, but those are the 2 sites you kind of need, plus an actual commercial real estate agent. And the second thing is, like, it'll have household income and average household income. It'll have the amount of people, but not every website has. What we find super valuable is how many kids there are between the ages of 0 and 3, and then 3 to 5, and then 7 to 12. And it'll have it broken up. And we'll see our schools that generally do better have more density of those kids in the area. And the schools that don't do well generally don't have as higher numbers. Now, that's just in general, because some school owners we have are just amazing operators, and they do well no matter where they are. And their household income is lower, their density is lower, but they're just great operators, and they do much better, right? So it really depends. You have to use those 2 factors, like the operator itself and the demographics. Obviously, you want to set yourself up for success. If you're in an area where the household income is $30,000 a year and there's only 7,000 people in the town, well, that's going to be hard, right? So you're going to pay for it you're going to pay for your marketing in Facebook ads or Google ads, or you're going to pay for it in your real estate. Usually the real estate is the easier choice, like location. Have you ever thought about purchasing the location, or you prefer to rent in the high-end shopping centers? Like, that's just the model, so you stick with that.
Well, I think a little bit of both. you know, purchasing locations is it's like everything else. It's dependent upon where you live. So being in the suburbs of Washington D.C., there's not a lot of retail space that's available for purchase, and typically those type of trades take place before it ever hits public domain. A broker finds out the space is coming. He's already got a list of clients. Before they ever put a for sale sign on it, it's already sold. So most, because of the fact that I want to be in a shopping center rather than a standalone building, that was just something that kind of happened naturally for us. The very first school that I opened, it's funny you mentioned the train tracks, because the very first school I opened was very near the train tracks. And, trying to teach a class when the train was roaring by was kind of difficult. But we were in the upper level. It was an 8,000 square foot building, a little strip center, 4,000 square foot on the bottom level, which was divided into 4 stores, a dry cleaner, a secondhand clothing shop, a hair salon, and a little restaurant. So that was on the bottom. We were on the top. So we had 2,000 square feet on the top, and our landlord actually had the other 2,000 square feet on the top. And in order to get there, you had to find this building, which was a little hidden. And then you had to figure out where we were. So, there were some steps on the side of the building that you had to come up the steps, and it was a little dark and dingy, and, but you had to come up that way just to find us. So we had zero, and I mean zero, walk by traffic. There never had any walk by traffic. It was always site specific. We had to tell them where we were. We had to tell them the exact direction, which I got very good at. Well, where are you coming from? Okay, you're going to turn here, come in this way, and so when we opened our second location, we went to a retail shopping center, and all of a sudden people started walking in, and kind of, that became a huge part of our business, was just the walk in traffic. So, 9 o'clock in the morning, 11 o'clock in the morning, all of a sudden some lady just walks in and said, "Hey, I saw your place. I want to get some information for my kid." And it's like, I had never experienced that before. Right. So once that happened, I kind of fell in love with retail locations, and that's why we did that. But buying a location, I've kind of had my eye out through the years, but there was never anything that came across my path that I looked at, and it was either a large shopping center that no way I could afford it, or a small space that was kind of off the beaten path, and I didn't really want to move one of our locations there. So we just, our model was go into retail, pay the rent, and use that as part of our marketing and advertising.
So across your schools now, the 8 schools you own personally, and the one uh, that you license, what is the profit margin that you look for? Do you look for 30%, 50%? What margin do you look for?
If it's at least 30%, I'm happy. When it's more than that, I'm ecstatic. When it's less than that, I am kind of analyzing and trying to figure out what we can do to maximize it a little more. But I think if you're have a profit margin of 30%, you're doing really well.
Okay,
And
cool.
particularly when you're running multiple locations, because there are, additional expenses that you have above and beyond. It's like when you're running one school, obviously, typically you're the main instructor there, right? So you're the owner operator, you're doing everything, you're cleaning, you're doing your marketing, you're teaching classes, and so on. But once you get to not even at 2, but really you get to 3, 4, 5 schools, and now all of a sudden you have a totally different job, right? You're managing these locations. You're not an everyday instructor at them. So, and then you have your behind the scenes people who are helping to support those locations. So that's going to add additional expenses, paying that full-time instructor and so on. So that, for a long time, that was cutting into our profits a little bit. And that was one of the other things that we did with COVID was we really cut back on our back end support in terms of the number of people that we had. So as we dropped, because when we were in growth mode going forward, 14 schools and maybe we're going to 15, 16, so on, we were constantly adding people. So we had an HR person, we had a bookkeeper, and all of these things were in house, and myself and my wife who was running operations. So we had a lot of extra overhead. When the pandemic hit, all of a sudden my wife and I were working from home. My bookkeeper, she didn't want to work at the office anymore. She wanted to work from home. So now all of a sudden we don't even need a quote unquote corporate office location. We need corporate storage because we were storing some things, but we didn't need that. So now I'm kind of lost track on your original question, but I know we were talking about the profit margin, but I do think that if you're at 30%, you're in a good spot if you're running multi locations.
So you mentioned before that you were overpaying some of your instructors, which obviously you want to pay them as much as you can, but it also has to make sense for the business, right? So you had to kind of restructure. So how do you structure compensation now for your instructors?
Well, I would say this: there's been sort of a constant evolution in terms of how we pay people and how we structure it. In the old days, we would hire somebody full time, and full time included a salary, so they were paid a salary to work. They got benefits such as health insurance, contributions to a 401k, and so on. And it was hard for the employee. And what I mean by that is we required a lot of them. They were because they were full-time salaried, there was no overtime. So we had them working 44, 45 hours a week, putting in a lot of time. They're sometimes 6 days a week, teaching classes Monday through Saturday, coming in early to get all their hours in and doing a lot of things. So when the pandemic hit, one of the things that changed for us is, I guess, what you would call the typical employee, right? The normal employee. And what we found was that COVID kind of changed things, and not everybody wants to work even 40 hours a week anymore. So like it used to be you had to work 40 hours a week or more to be a full-time employee. Now we've reduced it so that if somebody works 30 hours a week, they are still classified as a full-time employee. So some people want to work 40 hours, but some people want to work 34 hours. Some people want to work 22 hours and so on. So we have become a lot more open to what works for the employee. And if the employee wants more, we give them more. If they don't want more, we don't give them more. And again, that helps us control payroll. So, and the other thing is we can even use that as an incentive. If we hire somebody and they're, we can start them at 30 hours. If they want 40 hours, okay, well, once you are able to do X, Y, and Z, we'll increase you to 35. Now, once you can do A, B, and C, we'll increase you to 40. Or we'll increase their pay along the way. So there's a lot of things that have changed through the years, and some things, at least the way I view it now, it's more geared toward the employee. When we first did it, everything was geared toward the employer and what worked for us. And now we are more lenient and more I guess a little softer in our approach and how we work with our employees, and we try to let it be as flexible as possible. None of our employees work 6 days a week anymore. I won't let them. Even if they want to, I want them to only work 5 days a week. And, we've got enough staff where we fill the holes when they're not there. But we want them to enjoy family life. We want them to enjoy, whatever other activities they pursue, and to have a life outside of the martial arts. So, we pay them well, but we don't overpay them. And, we want to make sure that they're earning a living, but at the same time, they're not paid in a way where if things take a downturn, that it's really going to hurt the business.
Sure. So is it based on revenue? Is there like revenue share, or you just do hourly? How do
Everything
you?
is, well, that again, that's something that changed over time. Like we used to have a formula where we would structure where, um, the staff member, we would figure out, okay, it costs us $20,000 for the base expenses at this location, let's say. So we would say, okay, so the first 20,000 that this school makes, you're not getting a dime. Once we get to 20,000, we're going to share revenue with you. So each dollar that the school makes over 20,000, you're going to get 10%, you're going to get 20%. So we had a revenue share in there, and that was with all of the managers. Now, that's a good thing if the school's growing, right? Because, and then what we would do is we would start them with the lower base pay. So they'd have a lower base pay, but then as the school grew, and the revenue grew, they were able to make more and more money. Well, for your high achievers, wonderful. But what about the guy or the girl who isn't as much of a high achiever? And all of a sudden, the school takes a little bit of a downturn, and now their income took a downturn. Now, all of a sudden, they want to look for another job because they feel like it's too hard, or that they can't figure out what to do. So during the pandemic, when we started hiring people back, we started hiring them back hourly. We didn't have any incentives built in. And guess what? It worked. We didn't, we paid them. This is what we can pay you. This is how much we're going to pay you hourly. We're going to, still make contributions to your medical. We're still going to, have a 401k plan and so on. But everyone that works for us now gets paid hourly.
Wow.
So
Okay.
yeah, it's just, something that we toyed around with. And, um, I think, you've known me for a long time, and my motto has always been simplicity, simplicity, simplicity. Anything that we do, let's make it as simple and easy as possible. Because the more complicated it was, I would get frustrated, and perplexed. So, we always try to make it simple. So pay now is very simple. And again, the employee gets to dictate. So if they know they're making $25 or $30 an hour, if they want to work 30 hours, they know what they're going to get. If they want to work 35 hours, they know what they'll get. Or 40 hours, they know what they'll get. So we allow them to decide or determine what their income is based on how many hours they want to work, and so on.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah, it's interesting that you changed it in that way. I don't know a lot of multi-school owners that do it that way, but I'm glad it's working for you. That's great. What do you think the biggest difference is, or what advice would you give someone who they have one school, maybe that school's doing pretty well, and they're like, "Ah, I really want to open up more." What advice would you tell them?
Before you open up more, the first thing you gotta do is make sure that first location is doing extremely well. It's got to be super profitable. In the industry, what used to happen all the time was you would have a guy, they would have a school. It was doing extremely well. They would call that their headquarters school, right? So our headquarters school does fine. Then they'd open up another location, and then another location, maybe even another location after that. And then what you'd see is you'd see, their headquarters location does 50,000 a month. And the second one does 20,000 a month. And third one does 22,000 a month. And the fourth one does 18,000 a month, right? So that's the trick, is how can I get all of my locations doing 40,000 or 50,000 or 60,000 a month? That's the hard part. So if you're a school owner with one location, the first thing you have to do is, you got to you want to build that first school up, and then you have to replace yourself. And what I mean by that is you have to have trained your staff to the point where they can take your place so that you don't even really need to be there. So if, for example, if I'm running the school and I'm there every day and I'm teaching classes and so on, if I have an instructor or second in command that can take over so that I don't need to be there, then that means that person can run the school. So whether it's me or whether it's that person that are going to go to the next location, that would be what I would recommend, so that you train somebody up, get them ready, and then depending, because I can tell you this from my own personal experience, it's much harder to build a school from scratch, from 0 students, than it is to take a school that has 200 or 250 students and keep it at 250 students, right? So who is the builder of schools? That's what you have to determine. And sometimes you'll find an employee who is just like an outstanding program director, an outstanding instructor who has the ability to set up events and do a lot of inter school marketing and so on. And that person's perfect to open a new location, but you've got to figure out who that person's going to be. Is it going to be you? And you're going to turn your existing school over to somebody who you trust to run it? Or are you training them up so that they can open the next location? But you have to have the staff to do it. And obviously you have to have the policies and procedures and all of those systems in place so that when either you or the other person leaves, now, you're not there anymore. You have to have those things in place so that you can build it.
I think the idea that some martial arts school owners get wrong is they run one school, it's great. They assume they're going to open up another one. Like they have 50,000 a month in revenue. Next one they're going to make is 50,000, and it's just going to double. But really, what happens most of the time is you open up one, it's 50,000. You open up another, and then all your attention goes there. One ends up making 25, the other one ends up slipping and makes 35 or 40, and then you have like not much more money and way more stress. In fact, most of the time you end up making about the same amount of money and now twice the amount of expenses and stress. So you really have to have someone who's going to operate it and love to do it, like someone who actually wants to do it and is good at launching a school, or someone who's really good at following systems and can stay in the school that's already operating and keep it afloat. And that's really hard to do, because I can't tell you how many times we've had someone who were like, this person's going to be amazing, they're going to love it. And then they either A, it just doesn't work out, like they're just not doing well, or B, like they just leave for whatever reason the first 6 months. They're just gone. Like the end.
Yeah, and
I
a
think
lot of it is confidence too, right? Like what's their confidence level in being able, and that's why it's easier for them to take over the existing one than to start one from scratch. And what else is interesting about that is it's also like like my instructor told me a story one time. I think I shared this on Facebook. You may have seen it, but I was going to a tournament, and the week of the tournament, and I was kind of like the big dog at the school at the time. I was the top tournament fighter and so on. And my instructor, there was this big tournament at Madison Square Garden, and we went to it every year, and he wanted me to go. Well, the week of the tournament, I got sick, and I mean, I was like flu sick, fever, headache, congestion. And so about Wednesday or Thursday, I went and I told my instructor that, I can't go to this tournament. I'm ill. And he said, okay, you come to the studio. I want to see your face. So I went to the studio, and long story short, he tells me, John, you have to go to the tournament. And I'm like, sir, I'm sick. Why do I need to go to the tournament? And he said, if you're not there, all the students are going to lose confidence. And then he takes this piece of paper and he holds up this piece of paper, and I got a pencil right here, and he takes his pencil like this, and he says, you not there, student like this. And he takes and he punches a hole in the paper. And then he said, every student's like this. And then he takes the piece of paper and he puts it up against the wall. And then when it's up against the wall and he starts poking, he's like, see, against the wall, not go through. And in essence, what he was saying is that sometimes your staff, the people that you want to excel, don't have the confidence, the self-confidence, the self-belief that the owner has, right? So as long as they're number two, as long as you're there leading the way, they're fine. But all of a sudden you put them out there by themselves, and now it's up to them to run the thing, and they're in charge. They can't do it. And they kind of fall apart. And you're right, they leave, or the school takes a downturn. And I've seen that happen on a multitude of times. And sometimes, it was my fault. I put them out there before they were ready.
Yep, I've
And
done the same thing and not give
yeah,
enough help. Like, oh, I'm helping them, I'm telling them what to do, but I'm actually there with them. And I think when I'm there with them, like, okay, like here's how to, I don't know, visit a daycare or something. And like, if I'm talking to a martial arts school owner and they're in another part of the city, they're like one of my clients and I'm teaching them how to do that, they got to do it on their own. Right. But if it's like one of my instructors and I'm opening up a new location and I can be there with them, right. And this is new for them. This is like a new business, not a business they already own. Like, being the amount of confidence they get from me being there and listening to the conversations and like showing them how to do it firsthand is a total game changer. And that's one of the mistakes I made with one of my locations, which is like, yeah, I told them what to do, but I wasn't really there with them as much. And like after about a year of struggling, I was like, all right, I'm going to do it with you guys because you're not doing it the right way. It made an enormous difference. Me just like being with them firsthand, seeing me do stuff over and over and over again. Yeah, by the way, when I say over and over again, I'm talking about for like 3 to 4 weeks of like me being like all up on them and showing them what to do firsthand. And then they're like, okay, this is great. I know how to do it now. Thank you. And I was like, but I told you what to do before. And they're like, well, it didn't resonate the same way.
yeah.
Right.
And you
You're
built their
definitely right.
confidence up, and that's
Yeah.
the thing. You became their wall.
Yeah. Yeah, so I've definitely learned from that experience and won't make that mistake again. So if you were going to say there's one book that made the biggest impact on your business career to recommend someone, what would that book be?
Oh gosh. I think a lot of the Kenneth Blanchard books are great. Um, back in my early days, I read a lot of books. There's a book called I think it's called Finding Your True North by Bill George that I really enjoyed, about leadership. Um,
Okay, we'll
that,
stop there. That's good. One book.
yeah, that's
Finding
good.
Your True North by who?
Bill North.
Bill
I'm
North.
sorry. Yeah. Wait a minute. Now my brain is freezing.
I'll find it. Finding Your
Yeah.
True North.
I can't remember. Bill George. Bill George.
Bill George. Yeah. True
Yeah.
North Emerging Leader Edition. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. But anyway,
Um,
I have something I want to talk to you about.
yeah.
It's a really interesting travel soccer. Let's talk about
Okay.
travel soccer. So my son is I have 3 children. One is almost 30 from my first wife. That marriage didn't go as planned. But then I got married again about 14 years ago, and have 2 wonderful children with my wife Lana, who's much younger and more beautiful than I am. But my son plays travel. Actually, my son and daughter play travel soccer, and sometimes, like, I guess, to be honest, I hate travel soccer. I can't stand it, and the reason I can't stand it is because we live in Maryland, and probably 2/3 of my kids' games are in Virginia, which means I got to get on the Beltway. I got to go across the American Legion Bridge, which is the Potomac River, and I have to go into Virginia. And there's constantly traffic and construction going on over there, and it's crazy. So, I watched this, and then my son has practice, and he has practice on Tuesday evening from I think it's 5:30 to 7, which is fine. And then he has practice on Wednesday night at a field that is about 40 minutes away from our house. And practice starts at 8 and goes until 9:30 at night. And then he has practice on Friday and then usually a game on Saturday and Sunday. So I laugh with my wife when I talk about travel soccer and how much I hate it, because it just doesn't make any sense to me from a business perspective of like, why would, and I guess the reason I bring it up is I wanted to talk about scheduling. I think a lot of martial arts instructors don't really understand what's a good class schedule versus a bad schedule. And the way I view my job, like different people describe, what their job is. For me, my job is I'm a problem solver. That's literally what I do every day is I solve problems. If it's a student, if it's a student that, they come in and they say, we need to quit because, our job changed. My husband works, I work, and we can't get Joey here. My job as the instructor or the manager at that location is to find a solution, right? I gotta figure it out. Well, does Joey have any grandparents? Does Joey have any neighbors that are enrolled in our school? Is there any of his friends that he goes to school with that might be able to give him a ride one day a week? And of course, maybe you can reciprocate and drive their kid on another day as well. So maybe you can carpool. So I'm like my job or the job of the person at the school is to solve those issues. Somebody doesn't have confidence or their self-esteem is low. My job is to try to help them with that, right? So I got to problem solve. Well, with travel soccer, I look at this and I'm like, my God, why would anybody want to do this? And I smiled. I looked at my wife and I said, we've been doing this for 30 years where the schedule that we have at Kicks Karate is we offer classes 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday. You can pick the belt, doesn't matter which belt. They have a couple of afternoon slots that they can choose from, which we include afternoon like 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. And then they have a couple of slots after 6 o'clock. So if both parents work and they can't get there earlier, in the afternoon after school and they need to come a little later in the evening, we have slots for those. We also have Friday slots, Saturday slots where kids can come to class. So we've always tried to make our schedule as flexible as possible for the students. So, if you look at it like if a parent comes in and says, my kid plays travel soccer and we can't come to class. Well, Mrs. Jones, we've got classes 6 days a week for you to choose from. We've got these afternoon classes here. We've had these evening classes here. You can come on Saturday morning. We want to make it as easy for them to schedule their classes, knowing that they're going to have religion on one day, or they're going to have, whatever other sports they're doing. And, the thing that like boggles my mind about travel soccer is, as I look at it, is how disorganized it is and how all over the map it is. And like, in the county that I live in, I'm looking at it, I'm like, I know there's soccer teams in that city and that town and why are we going 50 minutes, an hour away to play a game when we could be playing the team from that town that's 15 minutes away? So some of the things that they do just kind of reiterates to me that we're on the right track in, what we do. We're looking for people that are within a 3-mile range. We want it to be close to their home. We want it to be as convenient as possible. We want to try to solve their problems, whether it's scheduling or whatever else they might have. But I just, I think that's like an important thing that even some school owners overlook is the proper way to lay out their schedule and make it as convenient for your parents and for your students as possible, rather than what's convenient for you. And that way you're solving problems before they ever happen. But anyway, that's my travel soccer story.
I thought you were going a totally different direction. I thought you were going to say, well, why is it that I keep going to soccer and it's the most inconvenient thing ever, but then people quit martial arts and we try to make it the most convenient thing ever? So I guess my question is, why do you keep doing it? Why keep driving to soccer 40, 50 minutes, multiple days a week, through traffic, through construction, and you hate it? Why do it?
If it was up to me, we wouldn't. But I have very little power in my household. Um, it's the kids. What and I, you know what it was when COVID happened. Again, this is a COVID situation. When COVID happened, my wife wanted the kids active in something. Right? They were really young then, and my son's in sixth grade now. My daughter's in fifth grade. So back then, I think they were like 5 and 6 years old. But the only activity they could get involved in was soccer because you're wearing cleats and the ball's on the ground and even the goalie wears gloves. So they weren't worried about anybody touching anything or any physical contact. And, the kids back then, they'd put their mask on and they'd go out on the field and they'd run around and they played soccer. So they kind of got into it during that time, and they started travel league and they liked it. I think if COVID hadn't happened, I don't think we would have started them in a travel league, and I think they would have probably just played recreationally and done something else. But yeah, the travel parents are psychos. They're I mean, some of the things I hear, the yelling on the sideline at the kids and the things, it's not good. But you know, it is what it is.
Well, how do we get kids? I mean, the real part of that that's interesting is like, okay, you don't have the power, right? So if a parent's schedule changes, but the kid's like, I need to go to karate class, I need to go to jujitsu, and they're going crazy, and they feel like it's valuable enough, they'll change their schedule. They won't worry about the schedule. If you want to do it enough, you'll figure it out, right? Like they'll be the ones going to their neighbors. They'll be the ones going to their friends saying, hey, who can carpool my son, right? They'll be the ones figuring that out. So how do we get our martial arts students to be zealots like travel soccer?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think some of them are. I think some of them are, but my take on it was I always want to make our schedule as flexible as possible, because the thing about it is I'm sitting here and I'm complaining about it, right? Um, and here's the thing: some travel soccer people do get it. Like if I ran a travel soccer club, I would take everybody else's business, because like it makes no sense to travel to Virginia when you have other opponents that are local. Well, they're just disorganized. That's their problem. And parents do get upset about it. And I can tell you that, like the Wednesday night practice that starts at 8, goes till 9:30. By the time my wife and son get home, because she takes them, I refuse to do it. They don't get home till like 10:10, which is really late for a sixth grader. And then he wakes up the next morning, he's tired, he has to get up and go to school. So it's not a good situation, but um, he wants to play that. So we kind of put up with it. But at the same time, that doesn't mean we like it. That doesn't mean we like it. So eventually, like it would only take a very small, you know, hesitation on my son's part of saying, I'm not sure I want to play soccer anymore. I'd be like, good, let's end that. We don't need to go and do all that driving. But I think for us, what we want to do is we want to make it as convenient as possible. In other words, travel soccer has roadblocks. And whether it's travel baseball to any travel sport, they have the roadblocks. Now, some of the parents love it. And I'll tell you the difference. Some of the parents live through their children, right? They want their child to fulfill their dreams. Maybe they weren't very good at soccer or very good at baseball, and they want their kid to do that. Or some of them are, have their heart set on my kid's getting a scholarship to college, and we're going to play travel X, whatever X is, until they make it, whatever the sport is. But sometimes, I think martial arts people love that. just like they love soccer or baseball or whatever it is. We just have to, in my opinion, we want to make it as simple and easy for them. As far as everything, if it's registering to take an exam, if it's choosing what class they're going to come to, um, anything that involves the school, if we can make it easier for the parents, and not just for the parents, easier for the students, easier for the staff. That's kind of one of my keys to success is if we can make our the whole process simpler or easier, because nobody likes to be hassled with things. And if things are hard to do, it makes them less inclined to do them.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Like, obviously, want to make it as convenient as possible because any blowback, like, if you have to choose between martial arts class, which is like, might be 40 minutes, maybe an hour, and the kid gives you any sort of resistance, and you're choosing that or travel 50 minutes to soccer, to be like, yeah, let's go to soccer, right? Because like, you have to make it convenient for the parents too. Like, they have a lot of stuff going on, and they don't necessarily want to spend 3 hours a day, but travel to soccer and then sit there and then travel back. It's a lot, especially after a long work day. So, thank you so much for coming on here. And if someone wanted to reach out to you with questions or get advice or something, how do they find you?
They can find me on Facebook if they want it. Facebook Messenger is usually a great place to get me. They can send me an email at jbussard, Bussard, at kickskarate.com. Those are probably the best two ways to get in touch with me. And, I'll get back to them as quickly as I can.
Cool. Thank you so much for being on here. My name is Matthew Brenner with Double Your Dojo. If you want to figure out how to fill up your school organically, that means through schools, daycares, and businesses without depending on throwing money on ads on Facebook or Google, and you want to grow organically, specifically 60 students in 16 weeks without spending any money on ads, reach out to me, wyourdojo.com, or on Instagram at blackbeltbrenner1. Send me a DM on there. Facebook's good too, Matthew Brenner. All right, bye guys. All right.